And well, there's some faces I know, some faces I don't know. There's a little baby too. So just to have an idea, how many of you are teaching here or working with students? Yeah. And how many are students here? And how many are moms? Well, yeah. Okay, so we have a bit of everything, and some of it overlaps. I hope you can find something useful today for whatever reason you came for. And I'd like to share with you first a little bit of my story. My oldest son is 6 years old, and when we were expecting our first child, we were talking about, well, what language are we going to speak to him in? Because both my husband and I are Argentinian, so we speak Spanish, but we want our children to speak English too. And we said, well, how are we going to do it? And we decided that I would speak English to them, and my husband would speak Spanish to them, and we would stick to that. But then we thought, it would be so nice if our children could learn German. But there's a problem. My husband and I cannot speak German, so there's no way. And we thought about it and thought about it. I mean, there's no way right now that we can go to a German-speaking country for them to get immersed in the language. There are no lessons either. And that's when a little light bulb turned on, because I kept on thinking, I wish they had a class for babies in German. I would really take my baby there. I don't think it's a crazy idea. I really want him to learn German, because we are like, our German surnames, we come from a German family, but somewhere along the line, 2 or 3 generations ago, the language got lost. Somewhere around World War II, it wasn't cool to speak German anymore in Argentina, and then people just didn't pass on that language to their children, and now we think it's such a shame. It's so sad. So that's when I started thinking, I wish there was somebody in German who could come and play with my child and speak to them with my child. And then I realized, well, I'm sure there's people who want that in English for their children too, because isn't English an important language nowadays? And so I started finding out, because I also thought that we live in a completely Thai neighborhood, and I also wanted to make friends and maybe find friends for my children and get to know other moms, and I thought, well, maybe if I open a class for babies, I can get to know people. Maybe I can help the parents so that their children can get started in English like in an easy way early on. And so I started finding out, because my first reaction was, well, maybe it's a scam, giving lessons in English to babies. Like, is this really something that we should do? But the more I started researching and looking into it, the more I realized that no, it's not a crazy idea. The only reason that it's not done more is maybe because parents might not have the resources to pay for something like this so early on. And it would make sense to have a class for babies or for toddlers if we live in a country like here in Thailand, where the children will not get exposure to English when they get out. So maybe if they go to an international school, but not all children can go to international schools. They're very expensive. So there is a need, or there are people who want this for their children so that they can get started early on, and from when they're very small, they can already hear English and become familiar with it, so that by the time they go to school, it's not a completely new language, but it's something they already understand a little bit, and they can feel more comfortable with it. And so we started researching about it, and I got a few students, and that's how this little curriculum developed, and what I would like to share with you. And I still have not found a German teacher for my children. So unless they go and get immersed in German, we might have to wait. But for English, there's a solution now. So the question I asked myself is this really, would I be scamming people, or is this really something that is a good idea? And I like I told you, I discovered it is a good idea. And why is it a good idea? Well, because when is the best time to learn a language? When you're very small, isn't it? It's the optimal time. We might not notice that they're actually learning because they don't speak until they're at least 1.5 or 2. They don't speak fluently until they're 3 years old. So we might not even notice how much language learning is actually happening, but it is happening. And if you expose them to more than one language, they learn them all. I mean, how many of you grew up speaking more than one language as kids? Yeah, several, lots of people. So you know that if you get exposed to it, you just learn it. There are parents who want this service, just like I wanted a German class for my babies. There are parents who want English classes for their babies, and they're not crazy. They actually want something that makes sense. It's also fun. Well, I guess that depends on your personality, what kind of things you enjoy teaching, but I found it a lot of fun. And while our main reason is not to make money out of people, this is not why we would hold a class like this in the first place. Well, it is another way of making a living. If you're an English teacher, it's another possibility. And if you have a school or a language school or even a daycare, and if you offer English lessons in these institutions, it can add value. It can make it more valuable to the community, to the families, because they will really be happy that their child is learning English. As I was researching this topic, I realized that there are many misconceptions, ideas that people have that maybe do not reflect the reality of English lessons for babies and toddlers. One of the things, I even read a post written by a father who's not a native English speaker, and he was trying to speak English to his baby because he wanted his baby to learn English. And he wrote this whole post against English lessons for babies. And one of his arguments was, babies can't attend a class. And I thought, what is he thinking? Like, maybe he's imagining babies sitting on desks like you. And of course, if you imagine that, then babies cannot do that. But an English class for babies doesn't look like a normal class. I mean, the usual classroom with desks, and it doesn't look like that at all. Another thing that parents told me is, oh, but my child isn't speaking their first language yet, so I can't send them to your class. And it's like they don't understand that even though they're not speaking, they're still learning, they're still absorbing the language. So this is no reason to decide not to introduce them to a new language at all. And yeah, this one I've already mentioned, that the parents think if they're not speaking, then they're not learning anything. It's important if we have a class for babies and toddlers, that we need to explain to the parents, hi, welcome. We need to explain to the parents from the beginning that they shouldn't expect their children to start speaking very soon, because some parents might become disappointed. Maybe, I don't know, 8 classes go by and the child hasn't spoken any word in English, and they might feel disappointed, but they need to understand that that's normal, that the child is still learning, and they don't need to get desperate that the child is not speaking. I mean, my son was immersed in Thai, and he didn't really speak it until he was at least 3 years old. So imagine a baby coming to a class, or a toddler coming to an English class, where they come once or twice a week. It will take time until they start speaking. And so many of you here, you've already told me you grew up already speaking more than one language. So you probably understand a bit more about this and how learning languages happens. When we learn the first language, we have the language acquisition device, the LAD, as Chomsky calls it, that allows us to acquire the language or the languages that we are exposed to and that we can hear. Of course, the experts don't agree as to how long that LAD or language acquisition device is with us for us to learn a language. Like, does it stop working once we turn a certain age, or does it keep on functioning, or does it fade away? I mean, there's so much discussion behind that. But what everyone agrees on is that there are optimal windows for language learning. And the main window is from birth to age 3. That's the most optimal window, especially for first language. If you don't learn a first language by the time you're 3 years old, there will be a problem in language development. This with the first language, right? So there's a whole process from birth to age 3 that we might not even see what's happening because it doesn't manifest itself until the child is at least 1.5 or 2 years old. But it's happening. The brain is doing a lot of work during all that time. This is just to show you what happens during all those months. We go from cooing right up to speaking at least 450 words at age 3. It's step by step, cooing and laughing and babbling and imitating sounds. And so it starts building up and building up until the child is already speaking sentences at age 3. And of course, later on, they keep on developing their language and perfecting it. But by age 3, they can already understand and they're already fluent in the language, even though they still make mistakes and they still say funny things. I just love the funny things they say. What was it that my daughter said the other day? Well, she got an irregular verb and she used the ed past tense for it. I don't remember what it was. It sounds so cute. Mommy, I bited this one, or I bited this one. Instead of bit, I bit this, I bited this. Or I just love how they do that. But she's 3 and she's speaking. Now, when we learn at least 2 languages simultaneously, which is what many of you have already done as children, and what we would be able to help children do if we offer English lessons to them, we can keep in mind that there's, like I told you before, there are windows for language learning, optimal windows. We can still keep on learning throughout our whole lives. We can keep on learning a second language. But it's, as we get older, it gets a little bit more difficult, doesn't it? There are a few people who seem to manage to master the language anyway later on. But for most adults especially, it seems to be a very, very difficult thing. So until age 3, it's the first window, the most optimal one. And then if the child has exposure to the language, especially immersion, total immersion, they can learn the language at native level until age 7 at least, or maybe even more. Like, my grandmother was German. She came from Germany to Argentina when she was 12, where you would say, oh, that's kind of late for language learning. But for some reason, she got immersed in the language, and nobody could ever tell that she was a German when she spoke Spanish. She had perfect Spanish. She was correcting everybody's grammar. and so, but she had total immersion. It was complete immersion, and she really identified with the culture also. Now, for children under 3 to learn a second language, they need at least 2 things. One of it is plenty of meaningful exposure to the language. It has to be meaningful to them, and there has to be plenty of it too. And they also need a reason to speak it. I've also seen it in my village, for example, there was a mother who was very stressed because she had been sending her daughter to an English-only preschool for a whole year, and she said, she's not speaking. She doesn't speak. Can you play with her? She doesn't speak. And then I just realized, after spending a bit of time with her, that she didn't speak because she didn't want to speak, but she could speak. She was just shy, and unless something really, really caught her attention, she just didn't want to speak. And one of my children is kind of like that too. Maybe they're shy, they don't like to be forced to speak, and if they don't have a reason, a compelling reason to speak, they won't, but they can if they want to. And later on, this little girl, as she she got a little older. I think she's about 5 now. Well, now she's speaking. She's found her reason and she's fine. But she got all the meaningful exposure that she needed when she was younger. One of the advantages to teaching children before they turn age 3 is that they don't have psychological barriers that many of us have. I mean, as adults, we know we have many psychological barriers to learning a language. Maybe we don't identify with a culture, we feel embarrassed. I know how embarrassed I felt to try and speak Thai, and like, oh, will they understand? And what if they don't understand? And what if I say something bad? And what if, yeah, but then once you overcome that barrier, yes, I've said a lot of nonsense too in Thai, but well, that's how you learn. But little children don't have that. And they also, another psychological barrier that children catch on to very quickly is which language is socially acceptable or socially cool and which one is not. And as soon as they figure that out, they can decide to tune out a language or to not engage in it. So if you expose a child to the languages you want them to learn before age 3, they won't have that psychological barrier stopping them. Like, oh, German is not cool. Nobody speaks German. I don't want to speak German anymore. Like some of the Germans we know from our community, they spoke German at home, but then once they got to school, it wasn't cool to speak German anymore, and they stopped speaking it. At least they were exposed to it before, so they still knew it. But if they had caught on to how uncool it was to speak German during World War II time, they would not have learned it. So this is one big advantage of exposing children to a language before age 3. And then there is research, more and more research is coming out. We still need even more research to confirm certain things, but the research that has been coming out is confirming that it's very beneficial for children to learn a second language before age 3. Even if it's in a classroom setting, they can still learn it. Of course, the exposure is not as abundant as if the child would learn it with their parents or with a family member, but it can still help them. There's a researcher called Patricia Cole, and she discovered in her research that babies tune out sounds from foreign languages by age 1. They need to do this because they need to focus on this one language that they're learning. So when they're born with the ability to hear all the sounds of any language and to recognize them, to distinguish them. But by the time they're 1 year old, they've tuned out anything that does not belong to the language or the languages that they've been exposed to. They still have the ability to learn those sounds again if they're exposed to the language. But isn't it interesting that if we expose them to more than one language before age 1, their brains already retain this information, and they might tune out the other sounds from the other languages, but they'll keep in their brain they will be able to distinguish the sounds from the languages they're being exposed to. So this is another confirmation that it's a good idea to have our children learn more than one language before, when they're very small. And the other aspect of Patricia Cole's research is that she discovered that the babies they studied, they only learned the language, they only acquired the language if somebody, like a flesh and blood person, was speaking to them. If they were just listening to an audio or watching a video, it didn't make any difference in their language learning. So this confirms to us that babies don't need videos. Babies and toddlers, they don't need videos will not help them learn. Maybe by the time they're 3 years old, the videos might help them. But before that, we're just wasting our time. And also there's too many reasons not to expose our children to videos, to screens, when they're so little. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I was comforted by this because you know, maybe as mothers, we don't want our children to watch videos, and then, but other parents think, yeah, they shouldn't watch videos, but wouldn't this video help them learn the language? Well, no, it wouldn't, so don't bother with it. It's not at this young age, at least. So how do children, bilingual children, grow up learning a language? How many of you grew up by listening to one parent speak one language and another parent speak another language? Anybody here? Yes? What languages were that?
My mom speaks Korean and then my dad speaks Korean.
Oh. Different Korean?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know there were two kinds. Oh, that's amazing. And were they very consistent, like one speaking only one language and one speaking another language? Yeah. No one else? Okay, so that's one way of learning a language. It's also what my husband and I are doing with our children. It's not the only way. So another way is, which I have actually never met anyone doing this, where parents speak a certain language for certain parts of the day. I have not met anybody who does it, but I've heard that this is another way of doing it. Like, I don't know, you do that?
But not specific time, but different activities.
Different
Like
activity, okay.
I speak Thai and Korean to my children, but reading only in English.
Okay, well, 3 languages, okay. Wow, that's amazing. So different activities and different languages. That's great. So that's another way of doing it. Different activities, different languages. Great, I finally met somebody who did it. And I love it that it's 3 languages, because most of the people I know do it with 2. So we should talk more later on. Most of the people I know, it's just like each language spoken whenever. I don't know, if you want to speak this one, if you want to speak that one. It might sound messy, but actually the children know exactly what language they're speaking, even if they mix them up. When I was growing up, I grew up with English and Spanish. English in the community, Spanish at home. And there was another Argentinian family also so we would speak Spanish to each other, but after a while, because we were exposed to so much English, it's like Spanish was harder. We had to think more to come up with the words. So we came up with this very convoluted language, mixing both like this English syntax with Spanish words, and suddenly Spanish syntax with English words, and we would mix them up. But we knew exactly what we were doing. And if we suddenly met somebody who could speak only English or only Spanish, we knew we couldn't speak like that. So that's another way in which children learn the language. The reason I didn't want to do that with my kids was because when we finally went back to Argentina for almost a year, I was too scared to speak because I kept wanting to speak in our Spanglish version, but I knew that that wasn't the way to go, and I had to think so much to come up with only Spanish that at first I didn't speak very much. But then, there was no problem. People would say, "You're so quiet," but they didn't know the truth. Another way of learning is if your parents only speak one language and they would like the child to speak another language, but they can't do it themselves, is if they get a family member or a nanny to speak another language. Have any of you learned like that with maybe a grandparent?
Yes. A nanny.
With a nanny? Oh. What language did she teach you?
Thai.
Thai. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, she's your daughter. It's been many years. Yeah. Oh, Thai, that's great. So that's another way of doing it. I don't know if you've seen in the news about a year or so ago, there was a little girl that spoke 5 languages, and she went to this contest. And I read more about her, and I read that she had nannies. I don't know, I didn't have the details if it was one nanny for one language each day or how they did it, but the mother made sure she had nannies for all those languages, and yeah, that's amazing. It's very amazing. So that's another way. Then the other one is what can be done in many communities. Here in Thailand, in certain parts of Thailand, it's harder to do with English. But it's just you speak one language at home, but you allow your child to absorb another language in the community. Because that's what's been happening with my children with Thai. We don't speak Thai at home to them, but they're absorbing it from the community. And when none of these resources are available, then we can offer language classes for babies and toddlers. Of course, the first 3 ways are much better than the language class. So if we have an actual bilingual person that can speak to our children, that's much better than attending a language class once or twice a week. But when we don't have those resources, the language class can help. And another time when a language class can help is, for example, if maybe the parent speaks English or a language, but nobody else speaks that language and the parent feels alone speaking that language to the child. Well, maybe you can send your child to a class too, so that they also get the exposure of the class as well as the lonely parent exposure. So there might be several reasons why parents might want a language class for their babies. So yeah, we've mentioned this already. So if the parents don't know the language, or if they know the language but they have psychological barriers and won't speak it to their children because of their own psychological barriers, then they might want the language class. I know a lot of people who speak English very, very well, and they could perfectly teach English to their children. But once they get their baby, they just cannot get themselves to speak in their second language to their child. It's like you want to speak your heart language, right, to your child. So some parents overcome that and they start speaking the language anyway, and they overcome it. But with other parents, it's like, no, they just want to speak their own first language. So it depends on the parents. So, well, we've mentioned this too. If the language is not in the community, then a class might be the way to go. And it's been shown that these classes can make a difference in the children. So this is the first part. I don't know if there's any questions. Maybe we can take a break. And then in the second part, I'll tell you how we do this. Are there any questions? Or have any of you learned a second language just by absorbing it from the community, but not from your home? Yeah.
Not me, but my daughter. When we moved from India to Bangladesh, she was about 4.5, 5 years old. And she just went out to play with the children. And I remember within 1 month, she was fluently speaking Bangla.
1 month?
1 month. And I was learning from her because she would come home and she would say something and I'd say, oh Ruchi, what does that mean? And then she would tell me this vocabulary, this little words that she was using. But I think what you have said, the early part of the childhood is very easy to learn a language. She learned it in 1 month, and if people heard her, they would not. She was so fluent, her pronunciation, her accent.
That's amazing.
I mean, she spoke it like a native speaker. So.
That's amazing. Yeah, if only we could have.
We could not speak it, even we stayed it for long. I mean, of course, later it was much better, but I mean, we couldn't learn it like how she learned speaking it in 1 month.
Yeah.
It took for us years.
I know what happens to adults' brains. Some linguists say maybe our brains are cluttered with so much learning already that we don't have our brains clear enough to learn the language. Actually, nobody knows exactly, right?
There is a research I read, a certain group of people that actually continue learning a language all their lives. I can't remember, I think it's somewhere in the Middle East. This study was done that people keep acquiring and learning new languages all the days of their lives, basically. They are not restricted to just the early age. But I'm wondering if it's because those languages have shared certain similarities, like maybe they don't have very unusual sound pattern, like English and Thai, for instance, they are very different.
So different.
Yeah, one is intonation, what do you call that?
A tonal.
Tonal, and one is just intonation language. So this is just my theory of it, because maybe those languages are the same, but of course I can't confirm that that this is right, but it seems like certain group of people in the world, it's very normal for them to acquire languages till they die.
Wow.
Whenever they come in contact with a new language, they'll start learning it, you know, like they don't think much of it. So I think this is just a challenge to the perception that it's harder after a certain age, they said. So it's not true for everyone. It seems like, at least on Earth, yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe for certain group of people, certainly the students that we have in AIU, I think we have challenges, but it could be barrier, a psychological barrier, as you said. Many of the Thai students, they still think English is not that important, I think, because they were told before Thai is enough. I think, you know. But not all of them are like that. Some who are positive, they tend to make more progress in their acquisition of the English language.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've read many people argue against this critical period hypothesis. They argue against, but the reality is I see that many of us struggle. So if there's a way to overcome it, then many of us don't know what it is.
So they said the acquisition of vocabulary will remain easy. It's the accent and probably grammatical points. Yeah, but in fact, when children and adults learn, the adults will outdo the child in terms of vocabulary. But the child will outdo the adults, I think, in accent and grammar. Yeah, acquisition of grammar.
So not only talk about babies and toddlers, but also about small kids. So now when we talk about how to teach babies and toddlers, I'll also include a little bit about preschoolers also, and show you where it might be a little bit different. So I'm feeling a little bit dizzy. I'll just have a drink. Okay, so the first thing we need to know when we decide how to teach such little children is we need to know where they're at mentally, physically, socially, in their development, because otherwise we can't really devise an effective lesson plan, right? So at age 0 to 3, most of the parents who bring you a baby or a toddler, you might not get a little child until they're maybe a year old. In some places, maybe 6 months old. But most parents are interested in having their child learn a language when their child is already saying a few words in their first language. So maybe at around a year and a half, that's when they're most interested in sending their children to a class, or maybe 2 years old. But you might find parents who are interested even sooner, maybe at 6 months. I wouldn't accept a baby younger than 4 months. But so when I say 0 to 3, I'm thinking maybe 6 months to age 3. They learn, like we said before, through human-to-human contact, not through videos, not through audio. So if we have an audio like songs or an audio story, it has to have the support of a flesh and blood person. That's very important. And they need repetition, doing the same things over and over again and hearing the same things over and over. We might think it's boring, but they don't think it's boring. They love it, and that's how they learn. Those of you who have children, have you ever had to read the same little book or the same little story over and over and over again? Yeah. It's like we're like inside we feel like, oh, I don't want to read that anymore. But the child says, yes, mommy, I want this one. So that's what they like. And they need routines. So when we have our class, we need to have a routine that they understand what comes first, what comes next. That gives them the security. And of course, we need to think that whatever language we expose to them, it needs to be something relevant to their interests, relevant to their reality, the things that they like and the things that they see every day. And we need to help them learn through their senses, because that's how they learn. Everything has to be concrete and sensory for them. They love songs. Children love songs. All children love songs. And babies and toddlers, of course, love songs. So that's why in any curriculum for children, not only the smallest ones, but any curriculum for children, there's a lot of songs and rhymes involved because it helps them to learn and because they love them. And it's very important for the children to feel that they're safe, that they're loved, that they're secure. Otherwise, they will not be able to relax and to learn. So how are toddlers similar to and different from preschoolers? The ways they are similar, because many of the same activities that we do with the very, very little ones, we can also use for preschoolers. So many of the techniques overlap. So preschoolers and toddlers, children under age 6 or under age 5, they're easily distracted because they have very short attention spans. So we have to have that in mind. They need hands-on activities. They need to be able to touch, to feel, to do. They can't just sit there and listen. They need to be doing things. They like songs. They need repetition, like we mentioned. They need clear routines. You'll even see in preschools there are clear routines, what is done first, where things are put away. Everything has to be in order and very clear for them, and they like it. They feel safe and secure that way. And in order for them to learn a language, they need exposure to it, and they need a reason to speak it. They also need to feel safe and loved. Like we say, we're mentioning this because it doesn't apply only to toddlers, but also to the preschoolers. And they're very self-centered. The world revolves around them, and so we need to have that in mind when we teach them. So what things might be different when working with toddlers and when working with preschoolers? Toddlers can speak only a few words in their first language. They will not speak their second language. I mean, if they're coming to you for a second language, they won't speak it until a very long time. Preschoolers can already speak in sentences. They can ask questions. They can tell you stories. You might not always understand the stories, but they can try and tell them to you. And their language is still developing, but they can already communicate in their first language, while the toddlers cannot still. And so when we're teaching them English as a second language, we can expect toddlers to repeat words after us. We can hold up flashcards and say, what is this? This is a bowl, and they can say bowl. That it's more likely that they will repeat after us, while toddlers will not. Toddlers will just look, and they might not say anything. In linguistic development, also toddlers, they all enjoy stories. But if you notice, books that are made for under 3-year-olds, and books that are made for preschoolers and older children, there's a difference in plot, right? Like for toddlers and preschoolers, they enjoy stories too, but you don't need to have a very compelling plot, you don't even need a plot at all. You can just have pictures, a ball, a doll, a castle, and they love that. That's very interesting to them. And they also enjoy stories, but once they're preschoolers and they can understand before this comes that, and because of this happens, they really love that. And so stories for preschoolers might include things that they understand. For example, there's a story, I think I have one here for preschoolers. This is not from my curriculum, it's from another one, but just to show you the kinds of stories that they like. See here, the cat is putting on his clothes, and so the kangaroo says, "Oh, look at you, what a mess. Cookie looks funny." Cookie's the cat. And so then the kangaroo says, "You don't put your trousers on your arms, you put your trousers on your legs." And the preschoolers will be laughing their heads off because they understand something is not right there, and I know that it's not right. And so they really enjoy that. And then, "Oh," says the kangaroo, "look, you need to put it on like this." And then it says, "You don't put your t-shirt on your legs, you pull your t-shirt over your tummy." And the children will be laughing. You don't put your socks on your hands, you put your socks on your feet. And so they go on like that, and because the preschoolers understand, because they like routines and they know that socks go on feet and hats go on heads, and this is all wrong. They really enjoy that. You don't put your shoes on your head, you put your shoes on your feet. And actually in the audio that goes with this, you can hear the clothes breaking, like that. And then you don't put your hat on your foot, you put your hat on your head. And now it's all broken. Oh. And then finally, Lulu, look at you, what a mess, ha ha ha, and the story is finished. So this is more a little bit kind of like a plot, but it's also a bit silly, and you can see cause and effect in it. And so this is more what preschoolers can appreciate this much more than toddlers. Toddlers will still enjoy this, but they won't catch on to how funny it is as much as preschoolers will. And also preschoolers can learn morals through stories. Toddlers can too, but they might not catch on to the meaning as quickly as preschoolers. So the reason, this is the reason why we teach Sabbath school from when the children are very, very young. We teach them Bible stories, because we know that at a certain time they will start understanding and learning the morals and learning about God and what God wants from us. They will start making clicks. It might not happen exactly at age 3. It might happen before, or it might happen a few months after. But meanwhile, they're getting the stories and they're learning them. And another difference that we see is that it's very clear that videos do not help toddlers to learn a language. They really do not need videos. Maybe from age 3 onwards in preschool, they might benefit from them. I don't think the research is very clear on that yet, but we know that since they're already speaking their language and they can hear better, some children do learn from videos. But I would avoid videos as much as possible. As long as we have people who can speak to them, they're a much better option than videos. There are just too many reasons not to expose them to screens when they're very small. Toddlers, when they play, they like to play with other adults, but they also like to play just by themselves. You won't see them really interacting with other children as they play. Preschoolers, at the beginning, when they're maybe 3 years old, or maybe a little bit sooner, they start playing parallel play, where they like to be with other children, but they're each playing with their own thing. They're not really interacting with each other. And as they mature a little bit more, maybe at around age 4 or age 5, it depends on the child, they will start interacting more with other children as they play. So this means that when we teach toddlers, we can't really do group games, or we need to forget about the idea of games and group games, because they're not developmentally ready for that. Preschoolers might enjoy some kinds of games, but they should not require skill. I mean, have you ever played hide and seek with a little child? I mean, they don't really show much skill in hiding, right? Yeah. So, so whenever we play with them, we need to keep that in mind. And anything that's competitive, anything that requires skills, we should avoid them at this age, because they're not ready for them. Toddlers, in their social development, toddlers are very self-centered. They're not ready to follow in group activities. That's why when I teach very, very small children, I like to do it as a mommy and me class with the mommy. That's also the way it's done in Sabbath school. Each child comes with an adult. It's usually the mother or a grandmother or an adult that they know well, so that the adult can help them to participate and can help them to pay attention, to take part. With preschoolers, they are a little bit more independent. They can already start following a few group instructions. I mean, not as much as older children, but there's a bit more independence there, so they can handle a classroom setting. But I don't know if you've seen that most preschool classes, it's usually not just one teacher, right? There's always an assistant or two. That's because they're still not, they don't follow group instructions like older children do. They still need some guidance and they need help. But we can see a difference there between toddlers and preschoolers. And the toddlers, they are dependent on the adults around them. They really need, they don't do much without the help of an adult, even dressing up, and it depends. But preschoolers are more independent. Preschoolers can put on their clothes, they can, some of them, not all of them, they can pick up their things, they can follow instructions, they're a little bit more independent, so they don't need their mother to be with them in the classroom. So in some classrooms, language classrooms, I don't see a problem with the parents being there, but preschoolers don't need it as much as the toddlers do. And then when it comes to their motor skills, with toddlers, there's no need to try and do crafts or activities like that because their fine motor skills are not developed yet. If you do a craft, it will be the mothers that will do them and not the children. So I kind of avoid them because I prefer doing things that the child can do themselves. With preschoolers, there's a little bit more that you can do. Like, they're still very simple crafts. You can't do anything complicated, but preschoolers can already start learning to use their scissors, and they can color. Like, for example, here's a book for preschoolers for teaching English, and they have like little pictures that you can color. This one is not from my curriculum, by the way. This is for preschoolers. Preschoolers won't color it perfectly, but at around age 3.5, you can expect them to get the idea that, okay, this one is blue, and I need to color this one blue, but this one should be yellow. They can start getting the idea. More like 3.5, maybe age 4. It depends on the child. With toddlers, if you give them a crayon, they will just scribble, but they don't have the concept of, I need to color this picture and fill in the color. So usually worksheets don't go with babies and toddlers. There's really not much place for them. But with preschoolers, you can have some kinds of worksheets, very simple worksheets that you can do, even though they still need the guidance of an adult. Then mentally, toddlers, they have a very concrete thought. So they can think about what they see right there. It's hard for them to imagine something that's not there. That's why we need to use a lot of pictures, a lot of actual materials and things they can see and touch. Preschoolers are starting to develop the ability of symbolic thought, where they can imagine something, they can think about something that they don't really see. Or they can remember something and they can talk about it. They can, so they can remember about objects and actions and events, and they can start making some connections. So there's a little bit of a difference there with them. And what that means to us as teachers is that, well, preschoolers might enjoy role plays where they can act as somebody, or they can pretend to be somebody. With babies and toddlers, that is much harder. Toddlers are not really ready for that yet. They might enjoy the activity, but it won't be as rich for them as it would be for a preschooler. So maybe role-playing, I would leave role-playing for preschool and not for a age under 3. So, like we said before, there are differences, there are similarities between both groups, but many of the activities that we do with babies and toddlers, that can also be applicable to preschoolers. What I noticed when I was teaching this age group was that even older children that were there, they still enjoyed the activities. And a friend of mine used this program in Argentina, and she said that sometimes the mothers would come with their toddler and maybe with their 5 or 6 year old, and they would say, I'm sorry, I couldn't find someone to take care of my child. Can my child just sit in? They'll be quiet. And the child would sit in, and the child would love the activities, and they wanted to participate. So this is not just for babies and toddlers. The ideas I will show you in a few minutes, they can work for older children too. Just a little bit more about the lesson plans. We need a clear structure. Both babies and toddlers and preschoolers, they need a clear structure. Here's a suggestion. It doesn't have to be exactly this way, but for babies and toddlers, what I've seen is often done is you have a hello song to start, an ABC song. Now, about the ABC song, toddlers don't need to learn the alphabet. They really don't need to. But it's usually the parents that want it. And I would see the parents' faces light up when we brought up the ABC song. So I said, well, what they can learn is that there are letters. And we would bring in letters or foam letters for them to see, or a chart with letters, or you can also have magnet letters. And they can just know that these are the ABCs. They don't need to know the names of the letters. They don't need to know the sounds. We don't want to push any academics onto them. But there's no harm in them singing the song and in them learning about the letters. My daughter would see a letter and say, Mommy, look, ABC. She knew that was a letter. And she still doesn't know the names of the letters, but she knows that they are letters. So just to let you know my intent in including an ABC song, it's not to teach them to read or anything like that. They'll learn that later on in school. Right? Part of the structure would also be several songs and rhymes related to the theme, but the songs and rhymes need to come with an activity, with a sensory activity. And then you can also bring a simple story related to your theme. And then, of course, end off with a goodbye song. So that's a suggested structure. With preschoolers, you also have a structure, but you might do some things that are a bit different. Like you have hello time. It's usually time. Hello time, a circle time, which I didn't include there, a poster time. The children start learning what the time is and where they need to be at that time. Because usually in the preschool class, they like to have areas. So, okay, circle time, they know where to sit for the circle. Poster time, they know where the poster is and where to see. Hello time, they know where they should sit. They need this structure, and they will respond well to it once they know what it is. You can also have a unit song, a worksheet. The worksheet will be different for each class. It won't be repeated. And then the bye-bye. And so we need to repeat. For both groups, we need to repeat. The good news for babies and toddlers is that we can repeat the same lesson throughout the month. So if you have one lesson per week, it can be 4 classes, the same lesson. They need this repetition. I know some people might think it's lazy, but it's not. They need this repetition. If you're teaching twice a week, you can also do it for a whole month. But if the children are maybe 2 years old or 2.5, you can limit it to 6 sessions and then change the lesson. Because by the time they're 2.5, they might enjoy a little bit more variety. But they do like this repetition, and they get familiar with the songs and with the activities, and they like to participate in them. With preschoolers, we will repeat the same vocabulary words and the same song, maybe the same poster, but we're going to change the worksheets and some of the activities. So preschoolers need a little bit more variety, but still within the framework of repetition. So it's still the same words, it's still the same song, but maybe the activities will be different. So the length for each lesson, how long are preschool lessons here in Ames? Does anybody know? Like each period?
I think they're given an hour. I think it's supposed to be from 9 to 10, right?
From 9 to 10,
Yeah.
an hour,
But
okay.
they don't always come at 9. You know.
Oh.
They come maybe a little later. But that's the time given.
Oh, for Sabbath school. I meant, yeah, for Sabbath school. I meant for school.
Oh, at age, I'm not sure. 40 to 45.
Oh, 45. Yeah, in all my research, as I was looking to see how long should a session be, it seemed like 45 minutes was the perfect time. It seems to be the sweet spot between not too long and not too short. The parents need to have a reason to make all the effort to go and see you. So if you make it too short, like only half an hour, like, you know what it's like to get ready to go out of your house with a baby or a toddler? Like, you really want the effort to be worth it. So at least 45 minutes. But if it's longer than that, then that might be too long for the toddlers. They start getting bored. Even if they like the activities, it's like, I've had enough. Let's go outside. You can start seeing how they want to just do something different. So I found that 45 minutes is the ideal. What we should not include, or what we don't need to include when we teach ages 0 to 3, is videos. Of course, we've already talked about that. If you're interested in why not videos, there's a series called Media and the Brain. You can search it on the internet. It's presented by an Adventist, and he explains really what really happens in our brains when we use screens. And it's very interesting. So that's one reason why we don't need to watch videos. It's really not good for the children's health. And also I feel that sometimes parents, they might really need, for some reason, to let their children watch a video. Well, okay, let the parents decide. I'm not going to give them a video in my class because maybe the parent might want to use a few minutes to give their child a video so that they can prepare their lunch or their dinner or whatever. And I'd rather let the parent choose when their child will watch a video and not do it myself. When parents sign up their child for my class, that means they want me to speak to their child and not a video. So we can just keep videos out of the class and let the parents decide whether they want their children to watch videos or not. And we shouldn't expect toddlers to speak. Some will, like the more extroverted ones might start saying, like there was a little girl and she saw a stuffed dog I had and she said, "Dog!" And I was like, oh. It's so nice when that happens because you see that they really are listening and they really are learning. But most of the children will just watch and listen and they won't speak. And we need to be okay with that. And we need to help the parents be okay with that too. And I would make, like I mentioned to you, ideally I would make it mommy and me class with a parent, a trusted parent. Because if the parent is there, the parent will know what you're doing in the class so they can support their child's learning at home. Especially if the parents don't speak a lot of English, they can learn the songs with you. They can learn a few words, and then when they're with their child at home or out in the shop, they can point out those words and they can support their child's learning. If the parent is not there, they'll never know what you're teaching the child. And a very important point is we need to get the parents to understand they must not speak their first language during the class. That happens so much. There was it happened to me once with one person who kept on speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking, and this person couldn't understand English, but she kept on speaking, and I didn't know how to tell her, please, you don't need to speak now. It's only 45 minutes. But, well, finally we found a polite way to let her know, and okay, she understood. But my suggestion is, at the beginning, before you ever teach your first class, you need to make this clear with the parents. Tell them, don't speak. During the class, just don't speak unless there's a behavior issue or the mother needs to comfort the child or something. Okay, we have exceptions like that. But otherwise, it's important. They shouldn't translate to the child. They shouldn't speak. This often happens. And they should silence their cell phones. I can't tell you how many times we've had issues with cell phones. in Argentina with my friend using this program and with me too. So it's just little things that sometimes we don't notice until they actually happen. And so these are some of the things that the parents can do in the class. They can gently redirect the child. And the program I've made also comes with a parents pack. And at first I wondered, like, oh, will the parents feel burdened to have to play the songs and the story to their child at home? And the truth is, no, they don't feel burdened. They want it, and they're very serious about playing the parents pack to their children and making sure their children listen to the English songs. And in Argentina, when they tried this out, my friend who did it told me that the mothers would even talk to each other. And how many times did your child listen to it this week? And so it kind of turns into a competition, which we don't want the competition. But we were happy to know that the parents are excited to do it. And it really helped their children to learn. So if we can get the parents on board, then it will really help the child to acquire the language. So just a few classroom management tips. Okay, we've already talked about that one. Toddlers tend to walk around and they want to touch everything. So whatever you don't want to use for your class or you don't want to use at that moment, you need to keep it out of reach. Have a shelf, have a table. This table is too low, but something that the toddlers cannot reach because they're interested in everything. The cell phone thing, again. It's really important to silence the cell phone, even yours. It's happened. I'm trying to teach and, oh, I forgot to silence the cell phone. So no, this is very important. And if you use decorations, keep them high up. And you don't need a lot of decorations for little children. I remember when I first started, I had these pictures stuck on the walls, and the first thing the children did was they came and they yanked them all off. so yeah, if you want your classroom to look nice, maybe do it up here. Or I found that the best way to have a cheery space to work with the children is maybe to use colorful foam mats. Then you have the color and it's already cheerful, and you don't need a lot of decorations. It distracts them anyway, and they'll pull them out. Transitions between lessons. This is very important. When you finish one activity and you move on to the next one, you need to do it so seamlessly, so quickly that the children don't even notice there's a space in between. Because as soon as there's a space in between activities, you've lost them, and you have to start catching their attention again. So this is one of the biggest challenges with working with such small children. So it's like you're doing an activity, and in the back of your mind, you have to know what you have to reach for next to do your next activity. You can't really, okay, now we finished this. Let's see now, oh, okay, let me get what we're doing next. No, you've lost them. So this is what is the hardest, I think, and it takes preparation to get ready for that. But once you get used to it, it's doable. You can do it. And this is another reason why it's good to teach only for 45 minutes, because after 45 minutes of non-stop teaching, where you don't even have a break in between activities, you are ready for a rest. But yeah, this is very important, the seamless transitions. And we've already talked about the parents, getting the parents on board. So all of these tips are very specific for ages 0 to 3 if you want your class to work. And so as for activities, this is, I think, my favorite part. You need several activities, and they need to be very short, because the children are so, they have such short attention spans that each activity should last between 3 to 5 minutes, not more than that. So you need to have several. To fill in 45 minutes, you need at least 15 activities. It's a lot. Sometimes you won't use them all. It depends on the moment and how interested the children are. But if you have enough activities, you don't need to worry about running out of activities. So they need to be sensory, involving at least one of the 5 senses. Most sensory activities, of course, involve more than one sense. So that's how it works. And they need to be safe. At this age, we need to think about, can the children choke? Are there allergies? Is there anything sharp that might hurt them? Or is there anything that might cut them? So whatever we make, we need to keep this in mind. Which, with older children, we don't need to worry so much about these things, right? So for sense of sight, many of these activities, of course, can involve more than one sense. So it's hard to box them into one sense. Flashcards. Flashcards are used a lot for preschoolers, but with babies and toddlers, we use them a little bit differently, because we don't just hold up flashcards and expect them to say the card. But we can use flashcards kind of as a book, to read it to them as a book. And they also enjoy touching them and looking at them. So we might use them a little bit differently than with preschoolers, but they still work, even though in a different way. Interactive song posters. I'll show you some of these posters that we have. So for example, for the spider, the easiest way is actually to do it on the floor, but I don't know if you can see. Maybe I'll hold it up here. So we have the song, we have the spider. Let me just bring the spider down. The spider. Let's get the sun and the rain out of the way. So we have itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Sorry. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again. And so if we make posters like that, the children will be looking at them and really liking them. So this is one idea of an interactive poster that they really enjoy. Preschoolers like it too. And another idea of a poster, well, we have, for example, we have this one with a tiger and zebra. So we have the tiger and the zebra. Both are animals with stripes. But the tiger is black and orange, and the zebra is black and white. So in this way, they're learning animals and colors, learning orange and white and tiger and zebra. So this is another example of a poster. And I think I have another one. For the slide, there's the little boy climbing up the slide. So there's a song about little boy climbing up the ladder to the slide, and then he goes down like that. So all of this engages their sight, and they can also hear the song, and they're using several senses to learn about slides and about going up and about going down. So that's one other example of activities that we can do. So it's work to prepare materials, and I know some people don't like to do it, but once you have it done, you can use it over and over again in different classes, and it's really worth investing the time to prepare materials. And if you work with such small kids, even with preschoolers, you really can't get away from having to make materials. Even in primary school, it's just part of our job as teachers. We can't get away from it. We just need to we need to have materials, we need to make them. So another idea that you can use is board books, especially the bigger ones. You can get board books with simple stories or simple pictures, toys, usually typical children's toys. They can be used. Like in the program I made, we have a song about these kinds of cups. So if you have a bunch of toddlers, you can give them each a cup. then you need to guide them, because for them finding the right size and knowing where it goes is too hard. But if you guide them, oh, this one, let's put this one, and then they can pile up the tower. So you can search for typical children's toys, toddler toys, and see how you can use it for teaching in the class. With this, we can learn colors, repeat the colors of the cups. We can even count them, and they can also learn the word cups, of course. So they also like stuffed animals, for example. That's another example of toys. Trains, cars. There's so much that we can use that interests them and that can help them learn language. Puppets. There are so many kinds of puppets. Let me see. We have, of course, you have the kinds of puppets that you can buy. Like you have the elephants. There are many kinds of puppets here. And then there are simpler ones that you can make yourself. Like here's a carrot. And a carrot, and here's a tomato for when we teach them about food. Of course, this one is not homemade, but this one is one that we bought and we had to cut and sew. But it's easy to make one similar to this at home. So if you ever need an animal, you can just make one yourself with felt or fabric. But these kinds of puppets, they're too big for the children. These are more for the teacher to use for the children. As for puppets for the children, there are some kinds of puppets. The easiest ones, especially for the very, very smallest kids, is to use stick puppets, where you stick a picture and you just glue a stick at the back. This is the simplest one and the one that they find the easiest to hold. And then another kind of puppet, which for the very littlest ones, it might be too hard, but from when they're 2 years old, they can use these little finger puppets like that. The smaller kids might just hold them like this, but it doesn't matter. You know, they can still learn about the pigs. We have a little cloud here. Where's the cloud? Fit the little fingers. And this is another kind of, well, it's made for toddler fingers, but you're supposed to be able to stick your fingers in here, and so the fingers become the feet. But my fingers don't fit here. Does anyone have smaller fingers? And so this is another kind. And then this is a butterfly with 2 slits here. This is also a toddler. Yeah, and then you have the butterfly. And this one's very easy to make. So different kinds of puppets like this, the children really enjoy them. And if you present a song with puppets, they really enjoy participating like that. So as for that would be puppets. Then realia. Are you familiar with the word realia? Realia would be real objects, anything that's real, like you can bring a real pot and pan, a pillow, a blanket, anything that's real, you can bring it into the classroom and use it. And that would be a good thing because the children see those things at home. And you can bring a comb, a mirror, all of these things are very good for language classes. Felts, of course, we're familiar with felts if we've been in Sabbath school. And there are many that you can make yourself. If you don't always need to buy felts, you can just get a picture. Wait, it's not this one. I have a felt here. Like here are some felts of fruits that you can make them. And once you've made them, they last a very long time. Because especially if the children come with their mothers, the mothers will make sure that they don't chew them or pull them. You know, so they do last a long time. So if you make them, you might think, oh, I'm spending all this time making these things. But then you have them for such a long time that it's worth it. So we have a pineapple, and we have a tomato, however you like to say. and a potato. And you can make felts of animals or felts of flowers. There's a lot that you can do. And the children love them. I have never seen a child who doesn't want to participate with felts. They really do like them, even the shyest ones. And of course, you can use body actions when we're teaching body parts, the nose, or let's jump, let's clap our hands. That is something that they see and that the mothers can help them do. So for sense of sight, it's important that we need to have large pictures that they can see. Let's not expect busy work. Let's not expect them to recognize letters or numbers, because they will do that later on when they're older. They're not ready for that when they're so young. They don't need it. And we can bring different textures and also clear colors, clear lines for them to see. So for sense of touch, as you see, many of the suggestions here, they overlap. Realia again, because real objects, we not only see them, we touch them as well. We can feel them. Sensory bins. Are you familiar with sensory bins? Sensory bins is a big thing in preschool now, where you usually get a big box, or it can be a big box or a big basket, and you put in things for the children to feel. So if you look in Pinterest for sensory bins, you will find so many ideas. And some of these sensory bin ideas are good for preschool, but they're not good for toddlers because they include very tiny objects. Like some ideas that I've seen for sensory bins are put in rice or lentils or some kind of bean, and then you can get, for example, if you want to teach about animals, you get lots of plastic animals and you hide them inside the rice, and then you let the children put their hands in and try and feel the rice and take out the animals. They love that. We love that. and so they find the animals, and that you can talk about the animals. And that's a lot of fun, and it works well with preschool. With toddlers, we cannot use the rice because we never know if they might choke on it or put it in their mouths. But we can still make simple sensory bins. Like one sensory bin I've used is getting a lot of balls. Here's just an example of as many different kinds of balls as I can, all the different shapes and colors, even more than this, and get a large bin and put the balls in there, and then let them touch the balls while we talk about balls and how round they are, and this one is soft and this one is smooth, and they just love to go in there and take out balls and look at them and see how different they are. I mean, especially if you get them from different materials, like this very prickly one, and then this one is soft, and then you have this one that is very strange, and the children always want to know how to get the little ball out. and so that's an example of a sensory bin. Another kind of sensory bin could be putting ice in a tray and then letting them feel the ice if you want to talk about cold or about snow. So there are just so many options. Another kind of sensory bin could be blocks. If you find wooden blocks and fabric blocks and plastic blocks, and you mix them all together, and then you let the children just handle them and touch them. So that would be another example. So sensory bins are great. They're wonderful. You can even do them at home with your own children. Especially if you're thinking, what can I do with them so that they don't get bored? And you can just make a quick sensory bin. If you just look on the internet, you can find so many ideas. I tried the rice thing at home. I ended up with a lot of rice everywhere. So after that, we said, rice outside. And then I felt guilty because how can we throw rice like that? So we haven't done it anymore. But it's just interesting to read and to see all the options that we have. Okay, toys again, of course, they can be touched. Different textures. If you bring different fabrics, you can bring ice. Ice is something cold. You can bring something soft. You can bring smooth things for them to touch. They learn a lot from touching all these things, and they learn about the world around them, and they learn English at the same time. And human touch. In the curriculum we developed, we also include hugs with the mother. They also get to touch their body parts, like their ears and their knees, and that is all a part of their sensory development, and it helps them to learn language as well. So for sense of smell and sense of taste go together, so you'll see a lot of overlap. Toddler appropriate snacks. This one, we need to be careful because I don't know if you've seen on the internet all the issues that some children have with allergies. So we need to be careful about if any child has any allergies. It would be a good idea to ask the parents before that. So especially things like biscuits. If you bring a little biscuit, are there children who cannot eat wheat, for example? And if we bring snacks, it should just be a little bit, and it can be connected to the topic. The idea is for them to have a sensory experience and not a full meal. So if they just eat 1 or 2 bites, it's okay. Like, we don't want to mess up with their eating schedule or anything like that. But I guess it also depends on the country you're in. I've noticed Thais don't mind, their children can eat anytime. But if you're in a country where parents are more like, strict meal times, I guess 1 or 2 bites is okay. And most of the time, sometimes children don't even want to eat them. They just look at them and smell it and touch it, and that's it. But they're still learning, so if they don't eat it, it's okay. So I like to connect it to my topic. So if I'm teaching about transportation, for example, and I can slice up some bananas and then talk about how it's round, like wheels. Or if I'm teaching farm animals, there are biscuits that they sell that have farm animals in them. And look, here's a cow. You can have a cow. Here's a chicken. And so that would be the reason for snacks. It's just to give them another sensory experience and to aid in their learning, but not to actually fill their tummy. Also, there are things that some children cannot eat, especially if they're younger than 1 year old, like cow's milk or eggs. We shouldn't give them that, or anything with honey, we shouldn't give them. So it's a good idea to research that before you actually give them something to eat, and maybe to consult with the parents beforehand. There are materials that bring with them their own smell, like wood, for example. If you smell something that's wooden, it has its own smell. Fabric has its own smell, and toddlers can perceive that. So anything they touch and anything they see, they're also smelling it in a way. Also everything they taste, they're also smelling. But there are also materials that we can add a little bit of scent in them. Like if you bring plastic flowers and just spray a little bit of perfume, just a little bit, because some people don't like a lot of perfume. We can use that as well, so that we're engaging all the senses. This is an important one. We should avoid wearing perfume ourselves, and we should avoid strong scents, because you might have a pregnant mother in there. I don't know, I've known people who they cannot stand the sense, the perfumes and all of that. And also little children, especially little ones, get overwhelmed with such strong scents. So it's better for us to avoid wearing strong perfumes. So with sense of taste, we've talked about the food already. If there's anything that is not meant to be eaten, well, of course, it goes without saying that it needs to be clean. We need to make sure it's clean, because children might still mouth them. The mothers will make sure they don't mouth them for too long, but it might still happen. And we need to make sure that they don't choke with anything. So if we have like a finger puppet with eyes, we need to make sure they're stuck on very well. Or we can just sew on or draw the eyes if we're worried about that. So we need to be careful about choking hazards. And so, well, we've mentioned all these other things. So that would be for the sense of taste as well. Connecting the food with our class topic, we've talked about that too. It's not just bringing something to eat, but bringing something that is connected to what we're teaching. Yes, I think we've talked about all of this. In point number 7, the food we bring should be something that the children will see at home as well, not something that they're not familiar with, so that when they see it, then the mother can probably repeat the word again and they can learn it. So for sense of hearing, I guess hearing is one of the things they will do the most, because they will be hearing songs, they'll be hearing you. And they'll be hearing objects, like we might bring bells to ring, or little wooden sticks, and that's what they will be hearing. Now when we speak, there's a lot of talk about teacher talk, right? When we learn teaching methods of ESL. And there's always this conflict, like how much can a teacher talk before it's too much? And how little can a teacher talk before it's like the teacher is not talking enough and the teacher is not giving the students any input? And sometimes it's hard to find the balance. But if you like to talk, I have good news for you. So because with little children, you're going to do all the talking, or 90% of it, more than 90% of it. You're going to be talking. So when we speak, we need to speak clearly and fluently, but still speak to them as if they can understand, as if you would be speaking to a native speaking child. But the syntax should be simple, and you should speak clear. And there's research showing that if we speak motherese or parentese, it becomes even clearer. The the phonological features of the words become even clearer. Do you know what motherese is, or parentese? It's like the way you speak to a little child in your language. Oh, this baby, I like that. I mean, you don't need to be so exaggerated, but see, for me, I tend to be a little bit monotonous when I speak, but with children, I have to make sure that I'm not so monotonous. I need to make sure it's clear, and that I'm speaking clearly, and that I'm using the words, and that they can hear each phonological feature. It aids them in learning, and there's actually studies showing that children learn better that way, and it's like, especially mothers, they are wired to speak that way to their kids, because that is how the children learn. So don't be afraid to use motherese or fatherese if you happen to be a boy, although most of us are girls here. And in another article, I saw the word parentese. You know, we have all these gender issues. Well, whatever you call it, make sure the words stand out and that you're speaking them clearly. Another thing that's very important, speak to the children and not to the parents. When you start teaching, the parents are not there in your head. Speak to the children. We've already talked about the seamless transitions. And another very important thing is we need to talk about what is happening. Say, look, here's a ball. This ball is blue and it's round. And we're talking about this. We're not holding the ball and saying, oh, this is a blue ball. Before we saw a yellow ball. They're not looking at the yellow ball. We need to talk about the blue ball. Talk about what is happening, not about what happened before or about what is going to happen. We're not going to say, and next, we're going to see an elephant. Like, no, we need to talk about the ball, and then we say, and now, look at this. It's an elephant. So we need to always talk about what is happening. And that is how they will start making the connections and learning the language. And we need to repeat the words and what we're doing. This doesn't mean, because I've also seen this, but it doesn't mean that we need to say, this is an elephant. What is it? An elephant. It's an elephant. We don't need to repeat so much like that. But what we do need to do is, as we're using the elephant, to keep on saying the word elephant. Like, this is an elephant. Look, it's moving the trunk. Hello, elephant. And we keep on talking, and once in a while we sprinkle in the word elephant so they can see. The elephant will say hello. Do you want to say hello to the elephant? And so it's a bit more natural than just simply repeating for the sake of repeating. So before we go to Q&A, I would like to show you a few more materials to give you more of an idea of what has worked with this age group. So I have some face masks. This is where the parents need to turn on their cell phones again, because we put these on the kids like this, and then we sing about the animals and talk about the animals. So there would be a sheep, and there would be a cow, and the children love it. Some of them pull it off, but it doesn't matter. They still learn about the animal. So then we have sheep. So for example, okay, once I find it, I'll show you when I find it. An object that can make sound. There are so many options, and one thing that I found here in Thailand that is really nice is the frog. So when we teach about frogs, we can bring this in, like for the hello song, and get them to play with the frog and hear how it sounds. The mothers can help them. And here it is. So since we're talking about frogs, where did the frog go? Here it goes. I couldn't find cuter ones, but the children loved these. The mothers didn't. The mothers were like, but the children were, wow. And so we can make a little pond with the frogs. So are you familiar with the song, Five Little Speckled Frogs? So, well, for such small children, we say 3 little speckled frogs so that it's not so long. And so we put a log, so the song goes like this. 3 little speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One jumped into the pool where it was nice and cool. Now there are 2 green speckled frogs, glove, glove. It's a very well-known English song for kids. And so we make the frogs go into the water. Then we can also let them handle the frogs a little bit and play with them. You might find cuter ones in the shop, but I've noticed that the kids are fascinated with them. And then once you've made this pond, for example, you think, oh, this is a lot of work. But the good news is you can use it several times. Not only for the frogs, but you can also use it for the little ducks. The little ducks that you get, and you put the ducks. And then you can even buy a bigger one like this. That would be the mother. I happen to have this big stuffed mother duck. And so... So there, you can sing a song about ducks. There's a very well-known one. 3 little ducks went swimming one day over the pond and far away. Mama duck said quack, 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 and 2 little ducks came swimming back. Well, if you start with 3 ducks, in our program we start with 3, and then 1 goes away and only 2 come back. And actually, the very, very little children don't care how many ducks. So if you don't actually have the exact number, but they do like to play with the ducks. You can give them each a little duck and then get them to put the duck in the water. You can bring something for duck food and make them feed the ducks. So see, once you make something, you could use it several times. Like this pond can be used several times. Another idea is, well, here's some more masks. A tiger and a lion. As for objects that make sounds, there are so many out there that you can find in the 60-baht shops, for example. For ladybugs, if you have ladybugs. There are, well, yeah, we have the frogs. We have, if you start looking, you find so many. Here's a little duck from the 20-baht shop. Yeah, so when you talk about pigs, it even makes the sound. And so here we have the black sheep. Are you familiar with the song Baa Baa Black Sheep? Yeah. So you can make a black sheep with 3 bags. 3 bags with black wool in it, you can let the children feel the wool. So especially with the little ones, you can put it against their cheek so they can feel how soft it is. And you make the bags, and you can, well, this one came off, and you can count the bags. And in the program, we've modified the words to make them a little bit easier to sing. Like instead of one for the master and one for the dame, which nobody really understands, we said one for me and one for you and one for mommy and daddy too. That's a little bit easier, and it's using more familiar words for the children. And so here's one about the sheep. So you can use all these things, and the children enjoy them, and it helps them watch. And if you change activities quickly, you can keep their attention. Sometimes they'll still wander off a little bit, but once you change activities, they might be interested again. And I've noticed that even the ones that wander off, they're still listening, they're still hearing. I don't know how they do that, but they do. And here's another one that makes sound. It's a bit difficult for under 3s to actually play it, but they still like to hold it. And they can feel the wood, they can smell it, and they can see that it's a monkey. And so all these little things, sometimes you can go to those 60 baht shops or those 20 baht shops, or even the toy areas in children's shops and in supermarkets, and you can think of ideas on how to use the objects that you see. There's just so much. I even used this star. If you need a star, and then you can make the children do the stars like this well, we have a star song in our program. Or you can make your own star and make it all shiny. And one more. When we do the section on food, and we have a sandwich, you can buy toy sandwiches, but if it's too expensive, you can make one yourself. This is for washing cars, you know, those hard, yeah. It needs to be a hard sponge. And then you cut it up, and you can make a little egg, and this is made from fabric, and some cheese. Actually, foam is very easy to use for making things. And a little tomato slice, and finally, a little burger. Soy burger, of course. And then you have the sandwich, and they can handle all the objects of the sandwich. And so that's another example of things you can do. And there's also a song about a little caterpillar. So if you find like little toys like this, that you can wind it up, and then it actually moves. Oh, you will really catch their attention. So we'll let him keep on going. And finally, some songs, you can even make illustrated songs like this. This one goes like this. The animals in the zoo, the animals in the zoo. We want to go and see them, and they want to see us too. There's a lion and a zebra. There's an elephant and bear. There's a hippo and a monkey, a giraffe and tiger there. And so that's the basic song. Of course, before that, you can just go through all the names. Look, there's a lion. Wow. Don't make it too scary. Because there's a story that someone wrote on the internet that she was teaching a lion, and she tried to be all expressive, and one little girl started crying. You know? So, yeah, we need to be careful. And something similar happened to me with this elephant. I was so excited to bring this elephant to the children. My son has been playing with it. And I thought, the elephant, and most of the children were fascinated, but one of the children got a little bit scared. So we have the elephant. Hello, do you want to shake hands with the elephant? Well, one little girl did not. So we need to be careful. Yeah, if there's one that's afraid, maybe we need to not use it for a while. But most of the children were fine with it. And so what I liked about it is that this gave them the idea that elephants are big, and then we can stomp like the elephants because they're so big. And then, yeah, I have just a couple more. Here's a song about arms that are used for hugging, and lips are used for kissing, and our mouth is used for smiling. And this is where we can use touch with them, with the mothers, of course. The mothers with the babies, they can hug their children, and they can kiss their children, and we can encourage them to smile. Some will smile and some will not, but they will still learn what a smile is because they will see us smiling, and because the mother will be saying, smile, smile. And this one about the panda, it goes like this. Panda bear, black and white, I just want to hug you tight. You look so much like a bear, but you're not brown, you're black and white. And so here they learn bear and panda, and they learn black and white and brown. They start hearing those words. And is there one more thing? Well, these are the foam letters that I told you about for the ABC. You can also make your own. There's a lot of things you can buy if you see them, or things you can make on your own. So it's just a few ideas of how to work with smaller children. And all of these things, the preschoolers like them too. They really do. And so that's a bit of what I wanted to share with you today. If you would like something written about this, I actually have a free guide on my website. We still have to upload it because we're still editing some things. So if you're interested, I would like to have your emails. Then as soon as I have it ready, I can send it to you. I have a piece of paper here if you would like to sign up. And you might have to wait a few weeks, a couple weeks, but then once we sign you up and we have it ready, we'll be able to send it to you. Are there any comments or questions? Yes.
You said that videos is not good for little children.
Mm-hmm.
What about the using audios only?
Audios, they.
Yeah, you don't actually show the video, but you only play the sound of the video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that won't harm them at all. Because the thing with videos is the actual interaction with the screen. With audios, it won't hurt them at all. There's no problem with that. It's been shown, though, that while they're so small, if they don't actually hear the language from a flesh and blood person, the audio might not make much of a difference. But it wouldn't hurt. I would still put it, because eventually they'll start listening to it. So if you have songs in a language that you want your child to learn, just turn them on. It's fine. That won't hurt them. For sure, it won't hurt them. And if you sing it with them, then they will learn them. If there's an actual person doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have relatives who like watching television, but my little girl, she doesn't like it.
Oh,
And
wow.
She will not pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Will it affect her? I wonder. She will
If
just
she's-
play by herself. She
Mhm.
will not watch. She will. I don't know if she listens.
If she's not watching, I don't think it will affect. You mean affect negatively?
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't think so.
She doesn't like it.
Yeah. No. The main problem is when you're watching videos, how they change very quickly, and it's the hypnotizing effect it makes on their brains. If she's not watching, then she's not getting that. So I wouldn't worry. Is there any other comment or question? Yeah.
How many children in one class?
Well, we found the ideal is around 6 children. That's what worked really well. I haven't tried it with more than that. I think it can still work with more, around 8 or 10. But 6 is a really nice number because you can actually focus on each child. So I would love to see it tried with bigger groups. It's, I think it can still work if the parents are there, and if the parents are guiding the children, it can work with bigger groups, definitely. Any more questions or comments?
Do you have some finger play?
Again?
Finger play, for children. Do you use finger play?
I haven't used it with this group. I think it would be a nice thing to do. Maybe because my own children they're not very interested in them, so I kind of focused on what they like. But I think finger plays would be a good thing for some children. Really enjoy them.
Yeah, thank you for the very interesting presentation. I really appreciated it. And, I was just wondering how long did you carry on this program with the people that you were teaching? How many months or how many weeks?
I had 2 groups, and with each group it was around 5 or 6 months, between 4 and 6 months. It was cut off. The first time it was cut off because I got pregnant again, and then I was very sick and I couldn't do it. And then by the time I felt better, those children were already in school, and they didn't need that class anymore. And then with the second group, it was cut off because they started with me when they were 2, and then they started going to school. So once they started going to school, they didn't need it because they got English in school. And then after that, I wasn't feeling well, and I just had some health problems, so it got cut. In Argentina, it was tried for about 6 months also, and there were children who were already speaking words. And when I did it, I had children, very few saying a word or two, but what I noticed was that they responded to what I told them, like, let's put this away, and okay, let's use the bells. Do you want it? Give this to what are the names of the children? Well, I would mention a name, and they understood. So it was clear that they were beginning to understand.
And like you said, I mean, we cannot expect them to start speaking immediately, but they are listening to the sounds, and they are absorbing the vocabulary, the sounds, and getting familiar with all that.
Yeah, and then the nice thing is once they go to school, like most of them ended up going to an international school, and they go in there and the language is familiar to them already. They might not understand everything, but it's not a very strange and daunting thing for them.
And is the class happening every day or how many times?
We did it, the first time I did it twice a week. The second time I did it once a week. So it varies. There are other programs out there, and I've noticed most of them just do it once a week. But then they have the supporting the supporting pack for the parents, so that they can also listen at home to the songs and the stories. So that's what we've created.
Okay, I just have a question. If, for instance, a parent is not interested to have a school, maybe a class, but maybe, like the parent wants to just teach their own children, how do you think it can be incorporated in a, let's say, a non-English speaking home, but maybe the parent can speak some English, but maybe they want to do it like probably occasionally, maybe once a week, for instance. How do you think that can be done?
Well, I haven't seen anybody doing that, but if the parent can already speak English, then they should be speaking English to their child. Or, well, like you said, they can get a specific time in the week or a specific time in the day and use it for English. But you don't need to worry about a whole curriculum or it might be a lot of work for just one child, and usually mothers are tired. But if you can get books to read, to make some English time, maybe books that you can read to them, songs that you can sing, or any of the things we have here, if if you make puppets and make little stories, or just to interact with your child in English. As a parent, since you're actually there, you can just interact with your child in English, and you don't need to have a whole program. This kind of program is made because we're working with a group, and so when you're with a group, you kind of need everybody to be doing the same thing at the same time. But with your own child, it can be a little bit simpler. Is there anything else? Okay, then I guess we can stop here. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to share this.
Thank you.